Does somebody have a flag, Jeff? Do we know, or?
Yes. Here we go.
We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag
of the United States
of
of
America,
America.
and
To
to
the
the republic
republic
for which it stands,
and
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Laura, can you just call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Trustee Dukowski,
Here.
trustee Hall.
Here.
Trustee Hirschbein,
Here.
trustee Kubiak will not be with us today. Trustee Meddy,
Here.
trustee Pearson,
Here.
President Wiedmeyer.
I am here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We do have one quick special presentation tonight. Jeff, you want to give a quick introduction to our speaker this evening?
Absolutely, President Wiedmeyer. Tonight, we have Tony Ganji from CB Richard Ellis on the line and on the screen with us here. And Tony has agreed to share his time with us to talk about the commercial real estate market here in Pinger Grove. Tony is the Executive Vice President over at CB Richard Ellis and has over 30 years experience exclusively in commercial real estate. And he specializes in the sale and development and redevelopment of land throughout the Chicagoland area. He's represented over 1,000 sales totaling more than 40,000 acres and sales in excess of $2 billion. Tony currently represents owners of over about 1,600 acres in the immediate vicinity of Pinger Grove. So, I wanted to welcome you, Tony. Thank you for being so gracious with your time and joining us here this evening.
Thanks, Jeff, and everybody. I appreciate your inviting me. And really, I think it's what I'd like to do is be more of a give and take type thing, as far as if you have any questions, just jump in. But Jeff and I knew each other from a former life when he was with Frankfurt. And I don't know if I called you or you called me, but somehow we connected. Turns out he's now in Pingree, which is a good thing. And I told him about the property we have. It's about 36.9 acres on the corner of Main and Main, 20 and 47. And it's a really good retail site at some point in the future. And, Jeff and I were talking and we said, well, how can we make this? There's a need for retail on this corner. How can we accelerate this? And then that's when he asked, we started talking, and then he asked me to talk to the board. But basically, we had the interest that we've had thus far and we've had offers from gas groups, and we've decided we don't necessarily want to sell 3 acres on the corner for gas. What we need is a big box. We need a grocer. We've been in contact with, through my company, all the typical Jewels, Walmart, Woodman's. We talked to Mariano's, we talked to Pete's, and at this point, it is premature because primarily a couple things. When you talk to one of these acquisitions persons, they look at, they're not that familiar with Pingree Grove, and they say, oh yeah, it's south of Huntley. Well, or west of Elgin. And then I kind of explain, I tell them a little bit about the demographics, and they still think it's a little green. Right now we have about, this is just general, it's not specific to any retailer, but they ask about the demographics. Our demographics right now are about 14,000 square feet or 14,000 people within a 3-mile ring. And I looked at that and I said, okay, well, let me compare that to where everybody else knows, which is Huntley, Algonquin, and Elgin. In Huntley, at Kreitzer and 47, that's 32,000 people in a 3-mile ring, and Algonquin at south of Long Meadow. I can't remember which street it is, but south of like between Algonquin and Carpentersville on Randall, that's 42,000 persons in a 3-mile ring. And generally speaking, they look at that. They look at where their retailers are, and are they going to cannibalize if they locate on this site. And I think generally speaking, the answer is, you know what, it's premature. Let's talk in the next 5 years or so. There are some retailers like Jewel, where in the past, and Walmart, they would buy properties in anticipation of growth. But at this point in the cycle, nobody's going to do that. We need to build the houses before they will come. So, you know, the question always is how many rooftops? And that's, you know, that's one of the issues. The other issue, not issue, but comments that I've been getting is, okay, if they are interested, then they ask, well, are there any incentives to the village for and I think that that answer, you know, is, I'd like you to answer that question if at some point, doesn't have to be now, but that's one thing. If we're fortunate enough to find a user, a retailer, they are going to ask for incentives. And if it's, you know, in my opinion, if it's a good enough retailer, you might as well give them incentives. Let's see what else.
Tony, if I can just jump in real quick.
Sure.
You know, what is that magic number? You just quoted 2 other municipalities that are, quite frankly, they're 3-4 times the size of Pingree Grove. But what is that magic number of that 3-mile radius or diameter?
There is no magic number. That is very, very general. You know, everybody has their own way of determining why they should locate in a specific municipality or specific location. That's just one variable. You know, the other is, where are they currently? You know, what's the traffic patterns? There are a lot of different things. I wish I could say, you know what? If the magic number is 32,000, that's easy. Let's try to get 32,000 and then we're going to get a grocer. But it's not going to happen that way. Even if we do get that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the grocers are going to come at this point. So I'm not, and you know, I talked to Jeff a little bit about maybe you get a market study, because all I can do is tell them specifics and facts about what we have to sell them, where the people who do the market studies, they dig a little bit deeper and they know the mentality of these retailers better than I do. So, you know, and I'm just telling you what the market is telling me. I don't have a solution for that.
Well, and you really did a nice job of capturing the essence of the conversation, Tony, because, you know, some of the things that I wanted to make sure we touched on was, you know, grocery/pharmacy, this issue of population, how they look at it, you know, a magic number of sorts, but you know, also the question of if there's anything that we could be doing as a village, and I heard you say exploration of incentives, which, you know, certainly as a village, we've done that type of thing before. And I certainly think for attracting the type of commercial that we want to see here in town, I think it's on the table for discussion. You know, if there's anyone that feels differently, certainly feel free to jump in and, you know, correct me there. But it seems to be in keeping with what we've done in the past. And the market study, that's a great insight too, because, you know, I see the properties that you represent all over the Chicagoland area. If you were to dive into that, you probably wouldn't have any time left. So, and I know that your business deals with a lot of, you know, working with people and, you know, I know you have a team behind you, but, you know, getting to what we want to help you might be a good approach.
One of the nowadays, one of the hardest properties to sell is zoned retail property, because it's just, it's, you know, there's just not, there aren't a lot, there's more, I was just talking to a developer the other day, a retail developer, and he said there are more developers out there than there are users. So as far as retail, like, you know, if this was an industrial property, it would easily be sold. Residential, it would easily be sold, but, you know, retail needs those, you know, it needs a lot of different things. It needs traffic. It needs the right traffic pattern. It needs rooftops. It needs incentives. It needs to make sure that it's not cannibalizing other locations. So it's just and also everybody's shopping Amazon. So, I mean, you put all those things together and you don't make that many retail deals. What I do, retail, industrial, residential, I do a lot of seniors, a lot of apartments, and all those markets are hugely successful, you know, at this time of year, or at this time in the cycle.
Tony, you talked about cannibalizing other locations. Could you expand a little bit on that? It's a concept that you hear often in our circles, but maybe some of the people watching tonight might not be quite familiar with what you're talking about.
And real quick, Tony, it speaks specifically to our relationship or our location proximity to Huntley, because I obviously that would be our closest locations where that process would probably occur.
Yeah, it's Huntley and Elgin, and those are the comments that I'm getting from people. Well, we have a store in Huntley, people in Pingree, they can shop there. Or, you know, a Target, there's a Target or Woodman's in Carpentersville. This is just, Pingree is too close to those, so they're not going to build another store. You know, Jewel, there are 2 Jewels in Huntley. I'm not sure why they can't build another one in Pingree, but they did specifically say no, not at this point. Maybe it's just because they're not expanding. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that touches on it in terms of, you know, what types of tenants are active in the marketplace right now that you are seeing them build new stores.
Well, we're seeing, like, as far as retail, we're seeing a lot of malls being redeveloped for apartments and outlets. And we're also seeing some, I haven't seen it recently, but like grocers that are second generation, where it was a Kmart or something else, they would locate in there because it's cheaper than building new.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have no inventory of
That's,
you know,
I know.
buildings, because we get asked
Fortunately.
that a lot. Also, is what is your
Yeah.
inventory? And you know, our inventory is absolutely zero.
Right. But the first ones who come in an area like Pingree would be a Walmart or a Jewel, you know, or, you know, maybe even an Ace hardware store, something like that. But again, we don't really necessarily have anybody like that. But, you know, a couple of the solutions, see, I'm telling you all the problems. One of the solutions is if you could just say, yeah, you know what, we might consider incentives, because then I don't have to give specifics as far as what are the incentives. You can decide that in the future if you like what those users are. But at least that way I can say, yeah, I talked to the board and there could be some incentives. Another thing is I'd like to see a market study, a retail market study because it would be independent, but which is a good thing, because when I do talk to these retailers and they're saying, something that may not necessarily be 100% accurate, I can show them the market study. I can say, well, no, you know what? This property could work for you, and this is the reason why. So, it's another tool. Again, I'm not sure it's going to work or not, but it's a tool that, could be necessary to attract a tenant.
Could you-
Have any of these big box stores, have they considered the fact that outside of that 3-mile ring, there's a community to our west about 4 miles out that has the same issue? They don't have a box store, and there's 8,000 residents there. It's called Hampshire.
Yeah. It's still within a 5-mile ring, there's 37,000 people.
Mhm.
Within a 5-mile ring in Algonquin, there's 144,000. So we still have the same issue, but that doesn't necessarily mean, we all know that there's a need for a grocer or some, a grocer.
Whole Foods.
Something, yeah. So the issue is that we have to have them focus on our site as opposed to just say no.
Tony, you mentioned market study several times already in this conversation. Could you just describe what that entails and maybe a few specifics that might be in there so we all can understand what that benefit would be of even thinking about having that done?
Yeah, basically what it would be is, and again, most of my properties, I don't necessarily need that, because they look and they say, okay, yeah, this is where we want to locate. I'm not getting that same response from the market on this site. They're saying, no, we don't really want to locate there because we have a store, 5 miles away and those people are shopping there. So I think what the market study will do is try to attract the user that we want, letting them know that they're going to be successful in this specific location. And even if it's a smaller, even if it's an Aldi's or something like that, once you start getting one anchor, then maybe you might get another one also. And maybe you might get an Ace Hardware. And, so you just got to attract that first solid tenant. But what the market study will do is it'll kind of clear up the idea that there are the people, they might do some traffic study, or not, they won't do traffic studies, but they'll show them why these people are going to locate at 47 and 20, and maybe they're missing some of the sales. Maybe those people who are in the area, maybe they're all shopping at a gas station or something like that. But if they had a Jewel or another grocer, they're going to shop there, and it'll show more or less how many sales they're going to be and things like that. It's just a tool that I could potentially use to attract a tenant.
And we as a village could take that same information to events like ICSC downtown, Rosemont,
Yeah.
Navy Pier. I assume that if they're not doing those, they will in the future, where you may have an opportunity to meet with various people and talk from that perspective. So we can certainly help shape that conversation and see if that's something the board wants to entertain or not, but good to know.
And the other thing with the market study, you could always update it. So let's say, we're not really getting that much response. It doesn't mean that in 3 years or 5 years, we can't change it a little bit, and incrementally it won't cost that much money.
Well, I wanted to thank you for joining, Tony. Did anybody else on the board or anybody else here have any questions while we have him? I do want to be, respectful of his time here this evening. He is setting aside his evening for us, so.
I did have a quick, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know if there was a study done, but I do know that somebody came to the board and did give us a magic number and said, and that number was 10,000, because I know that I've kind of reiterated that to other residents who are wondering why we didn't have more commercial. And I'm saying, okay, now we're at 10,000, now we can get it. It seems, and is that a fluctuation of the market that now that number has gone up, even though I know it's a
No.
nebulous number, but it seems like it's, 3 times as high as what that number was a few years ago.
No, I think that 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000, whatever the number is, it's more than just that number. If they don't have any stores anywhere around there, maybe 10,000 is the number. But also, or if there's 50,000 cars a day, maybe it is. Do you remember the use?
No, not specifically. I know that it was a general comment that once we get 10,000 residents within, and I thought it was a 5-mile radius, that, maybe the Walgreens or CVS or Jewel would come.
Yeah, I had a CVS at Kreitzer and 47, and those. Right now, it's a gas station, Thornton's. CVS went through the whole process, and then they decided that they didn't want. And Kreitzer and 47 is 32,000.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that. Walgreens really, at this point, they're not really expanding. And then, it doesn't mean CVS isn't going to go here if it's 14 or 15,000. It's more than just it's more than the traffic counts. It's more than the population. And it could have been, at that point, it could have been like a CVS, because maybe at that point they were expanding, but then management changes, their strategies change. So I don't know.
Yeah, so much of the location decision can be based on the business motive as much as it is what the market has.
Yeah. Or are they busy? Are they too busy to focus on this? It would be nice if we knew exactly how everybody thinks, and everybody's different too.
Anybody else have anything? Well, Tony, thanks again for.
Thank you,
being so
Tony. We
gracious
appreciate your
with
time tonight.
Thank you. I'll sign off.
All right, we'll see you.
Okay, should we continue?
Yes, we can continue.
Next item of business is our consent agenda, which tonight includes the approval of the minutes from the board meeting of January 4th of this year, the approval of warrant lists, January 17th, 2022, in the amount of $163,223.78, and tonight's warrant list in the amount of $294,211.66, and also a consent to the initial appointment of the appointment of the Board of Police Commissioner members. So we get
I will motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank
I
you.
will second.
Is there any questions or comments on the consent agenda this evening?
Call the roll. Trustee Hall,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Dolkowski,
Yes.
trustee Meddy,
Yes.
and trustee Hirschbein.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Items for separate action this evening. Item A is a consideration and approval of an ordinance authorizing the loan agreement for a non-home rule entity for the water treatment plant. Jeff, you want to give us a little background on this, please?
Sure thing, President Wiedmeyer. And you wouldn't mind, I'd like to combine this with 6B as they are dealing with the same topic.
Absolutely.
Um, So the first item here, they're both related to the water treatment plant expansion. The first item is an ordinance authorizing a loan agreement for that water treatment plant project. The second item is a resolution authorizing the execution of a notice of intent to award bid. Now, if this seems familiar, it is because we passed a similar ordinance in July of 2021 for the same project. After that point, our engineer, Fair Graham, completed their design work, and we put the project out to bid starting in December, and we had a bid opening on January 20th, 2022. There were 7 bidders, and Fair Graham reviewed those bids and found the lowest responsive bid to be submitted by Williams Brothers Construction Incorporated in the amount of $8.18 million, which turned out to be higher than the engineer's estimate. In looking at that, it seems that there was a lot of reasons why that happened the way that it did. Surely you've heard in the discussion in the news media about supply chain issues that are affecting material and equipment pricing. We're also in an inflationary market environment, which is producing uncertainty in the future costs and pricing. Also, because of materials and equipment and sometimes the delay, a lot of these contractors are expecting the project to take a little longer to complete, which means they got to be mobilized longer, and that adds cost to the project. Another environmental issue that's out there, not environmental in the sense of trees and streams and stuff, but more of a economics 101 situation. There's a lot of money coming from the federal government, and even the state for that matter, in our case, that funds projects like these. And so we have a high demand for projects and a relatively fixed supply of contractors. Those things start to push up bid prices. The situation, of course, is not preferred, but we do need a second water treatment plant and well sooner than later, as we are currently operating a community over 10,000 people from a single water treatment plant. After those bids came in, we did internally talk about potentially rebidding the project or waiting. And that wasn't really a favorite approach because, one, we know it's going to affect the low interest loan rate, which right now is locked at 1.11% through June. And there's also no guarantee that bids are going to come in any lower. And in fact, they could come in higher. It's a roll of the dice. But at 1.11%, it's pretty hard to look at the interest savings that could be achieved through that. So tonight, we do have an ordinance that's presented for your consideration that would authorize an IEPA low interest loan for a 30-year term up to $9.25 million. And why that amount? Well, the project bid is 8.18. We would then finance construction engineering service at $477,000. There's a 5% contingency in there from IEPA that's required at $409,000. Construction period interest estimate at 1.5% or $136,000, which brings the total project to about $9.2 million, just over that, which is in line with the ordinance presented this evening. It's not necessary for the village to actually utilize that full loan should other financing options arise. For instance, we do have federal funding from the American Rescue Act, and that's over $1 million. That can defer it. We may not need that contingency. And the IEPA has also awarded $400,000 of principal forgiveness that will benefit us. So it's unlikely that we will actually see anything even close to that 9.25. But this is the fastest way and smoothest way with the IEPA, where they can move forward with a loan agreement and understand that without a doubt, funding is in place to move forward with this project and complete it. So if approved this evening, the next item that we would consider is a resolution that approves the notice of intent to award bid to Williams Brothers Construction Incorporated. That is also required as part of the IEPA loan process. And following, Fairground will coordinate with the IEPA to write the actual loan. Once that's completed, the final documents would return to the board to approve the actual loan agreement and officially award the bid. Timing of that, of course, is dependent on the IEPA's turnaround, but we assume and estimate it to be about 60 to 90 days. So with that, that concludes my report on these two items. And I'll turn that back over to the board if there's any discussion or motions.
Is there any questions for Jeff before we do this, or Seth, do you have anything to add to this? I mean, are you seeing this same situation in other projects that you're currently working on, Seth?
Yeah, we actually, I took an opportunity to speak with we recently acquired Deutschler Engineering in Aurora. And I took an opportunity to talk to them about independent projects that they were working on. And they informed me that they have been seeing price increases as recently as they put together an estimate, maybe I think they said a year ago, and updated it. And it's been about a 30% increase, which is proportionally in line with what was seen on this bid. So that 30% number is really kind of what's ringing true across the industry as far as total increase in pricing. And other than that, I think, Jeff pretty much nailed all the rest of it on the head as far as, the reason why we're seeing that 30%.
And until there's a slowdown in these projects, we're never going to see this trend recede, correct?
Yeah. At this point, I mean, there was a lot of questions during bidding from contractors asking if there was ways to manipulate the bid form to allow for price escalators because of, let's just say, for example, steel casing pipe in the well. The material prices that they were being provided by the suppliers were only good for 2 days, and they have to hold their bids for 120 days, because of the IEPA loan process and how that works. And so, that in itself makes it, a risk to bidders, because of how volatile the market is right now with materials. So I guess to answer your question, until the supply chain corrects itself, which at this point it's been this way now for quite some time, I don't know when we will see an adjustment in that. I think if you ask Pat as well, Pat has mentioned that 30% number seems to be applying to a lot of the materials that he's purchasing just on a regular basis. That just seems to be the increase in cost right now.
I can add a little bit of an anecdote as well. I reached out to a colleague at a different engineering firm just to touch base. And it turns out they are actually trying to bid a water treatment plant project themselves. And, they were experiencing on road projects and things, increases like Seth is talking about. But on the water treatment plant, they're a bit behind where we're at. And they were looking at how do we come up with the engineer's estimate for this project. And they were calling around to different contractors trying to get numbers, and they expressed the same difficulty in preparing their own estimate because they couldn't get numbers that they felt confident about. So anecdotally, it seems that this firm I spoke to also is experiencing that type of issue in the marketplace right now, for what it's worth.
So I'm just a little confused. It seems like what we are looking to vote or approve is the process of getting the loan, or this is the process of getting the loan. And so this is the first 2 steps, is to say, yep, we want a loan, and we plan to go forward with the loan. And number two, we plan to award the bid to so-and-so. Are we under an obligation? What if something changed major in the next, 3 months before we go to the next step, which is, we said we were going to do it and now we're really going to do it. What if something changes? Are we under an obligation to follow through on what we're tonight potentially saying that we intend to do?
Jeff, you want me to answer?
Sure thing.
So technically, the answer to that is no. Technically, you're not obligated, right? But the notice of intent to award is basically a reassurance to IEPA that they're not going to go through the effort of writing this loan agreement and allocating the money to the project, and then to have, the project ultimately not be officially awarded. So in a sense, it's a commitment, but at the end of the day, if something, crazy were to happen, there still is an out. It just is, not necessarily maybe, something that the village may want to do, as far as making it easier the next time that they are looking for funding from the EPA. Does that make sense?
Yes, that helps. Not that we would go through with something with, the intention of, yeah, we might, but we might as well, prove it. That wasn't my reason for asking. I wasn't sure how committed we were in this process. I just have a second, just a smaller question. Under the budget, what's the 5% contingency? What is that? What's
So
a
that's-
contingency?
Contingency is basically just money that is planned for, say there's adjustments during construction, or change orders. The EPA typically, as part of their loan agreements, requires a 5% or more contingency to be accounted for. So that way, if there are changes during construction, it's not as large of a process to modify the loan agreement, because essentially if you were to, exceed the total 9.25 million in the debt authorizing ordinance, there would be a process to technically amend that. It's just a way of trying to, prevent additional paperwork down the road if there are changes during construction.
Okay.
So that contingency may or may not be utilized.
And Seth, would it be inappropriate if I asked what your choice would be for the option, if your professional opinion for Pingree Grove in our financial position, knowing what you know, you think it's feasible that we go with option one?
Option one, meaning award, yet, yes, I guess my.
Full amount and award the bid.
In my opinion, I would agree that this is probably the best course of action as the market continues, the amount of work that is hitting the market with the available funding that's being provided to communities. There is a large amount of work. I had during the bidding, there were several contractors that indicated that, there was another water treatment plant just down the road in St. Charles that was bidding on the same exact day as Pingree Grove. I mean, these types of projects are there's lots of them happening right now. Infrastructure improvements and it are in abundance, I guess, right now. So I guess what I'm saying by that is the more of those projects that there are, the less contractors that are available to complete them. And once a contractor kind of fills up their book of business, it makes that difficult to get competitive pricing. It was really good to see 7 bids here. It was a very attractive project to contractors. But I guess I won't continue on. My recommendation is yes, especially with the 1.11% interest,
Okay.
which is lower than what was anticipated.
And then I have one more person to ask. Albert, what's your recommendation, knowing what you know about our finance?
Knowing what I know, I totally agree with Seth's assessment, but the low interest rate is very favorable. Originally, our projections, I believe, were at least 2.5%. on a lesser term, but again, this is for a 30-year loan. So yes, I would be in total agreement of this project as it's constructed and presented.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to move forward with a motion on
Yes,
this?
yeah, I will. I'd like to move forward to approve an ordinance authorizing a loan agreement for a non-home rule entity for the water treatment plant.
Second.
Do you need a separate motion for B?
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and we'll call the,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
call
thought
the
we
vote
were.
on the first one. Is there any more questions on item A?
Hey, Jeff or Mike, is there, are these price increases is 30%? Is that being negotiated into the annexation agreement to offset?
The annexation agreement
The
for
connection fees?
the proposal that's before us. We have not discussed that issue with the applicant.
Okay.
I feel that we're running a risk of not having two water treatment plants is that it's pretty important. As we saw a few years ago when one of the wells went down and when we did the water tower, we need another water tower as well. But I think it's imperative that we have more than one treatment plant. So
Good points. Okay, Laura, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, trustee Hirschbein,
Yes,
trustee Pearson,
yes,
trustee Hall,
Yes.
trustee Meddy,
yes,
trustee Dolkowski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And then is there a motion for item B?
sure.
I'm-
I'll do that one again. I move to approve a resolution authorizing the notice of intent to award the bid for water treatment plant number 2 and well number 3 to Williams Brothers Construction Incorporated, subject to IEPA's approval of a low interest loan agreement for the project.
I second the
Second.
motion.
All right, trustee Hirschbein,
I did have a question.
Okay,
I'm sorry. Is their bid locked in? Can they come back in 2 months and say, you know, the steel has gone up and we're increasing our price?
No, they're required per the bidding documents to hold their pricing for 120 days.
Thank you.
all right.
is that, Seth, something that, I mean, the steel casing is like the something that you referenced earlier. That's a big part of this project. Is that something that they could use that contingency fund for also?
No, this is part of their, submitted bid. There's no adjustment within that 120-day period to the pricing that they submitted. The contingency would strictly be for unexpected items during construction, change orders, et cetera.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay.
Any other questions before we call the roll?
None.
Okay,
Thank you, Laura.
all right, I'll start, please. Trustee Hirschbein,
Yes,
trustee Hall,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
yes,
trustee Dolkowski,
Yes.
trustee Meddy,
Yes,
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think that's an exciting step that we're taking, and I'm sure our residents will appreciate having safe and water and knowing that we're taking the necessary steps to ensure that our systems remain, cutting edge and that. Okay, item C is a consideration and approval of the purchase of a replacement master meter and installation services for the Wester Boulevard lift station. Jeff or Pat, you want to talk about this one real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I can. So every lift station has a meter that measures outgoing flows. The meter at Wester Lift Station failed a month or so ago, and we've looked at other options because the meter is in a location that if you remove it, you have to shut the lift station down. There's no way to bypass the flows. And there's not a lot of room to work in the small vault that it's in. We looked at also a software that would just, if the pump was running, it would measure flow. The problem with that situation, it could measure flow even if the pump is clogged, which isn't a good situation. There are other things in place to alert us that the station isn't working, but we really need to know flows. The best solution is to pull the meter out and put a new meter in. One of the contractors that was performing work this summer, we contacted him. They have done 22 of these down in Naperville. They had a few meters that failed and they decided to replace all their meters. He made a special tool that helps spread the pipe and hold the pipe apart, so when they pull the meter out, it doesn't shrink in and cause the new meter not to fit in. He's very, very confident that this is a quick job for them. They'll be there for the day, and they also will have a Vector truck there for the day in case they run into time constraints. But we know we can shut the station down at certain times of the day for up to 6 hours or so without any issues. And so we're going to work around those time constraints to do this. But we need a meter in the station, and that's the only way really to assure that the pumps are working correctly. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. It said additionally, connection points for emergency pumping are located behind the meter and cannot be utilized while the meter is removed. Is there any way to reroute that to make it so maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, you could use that, utilize that option?
Yes, it's just really, really expensive. It takes it from like a 30 to a 70+ thousand dollar, and they've got to do it while the system is running. You know, they can't shut it down. So it's not an easy solution. The best thing would be to have a bypass, because I asked, why not just take this opportunity to do a bypass at the same time? It just really bumps the price up. And the contractor, because of the price to put that in now, and you know, there's many other municipalities in the same boat. He just said, once they got a couple of these under their belt at Naperville, the rest just clicked right along. And he's very confident that they can do this pretty quick. We could at a later time, but I just felt that that was too big of a repair right now to put that bypass in.
I move to approve the purchase of a replacement master meter and installation services for the Wester Boulevard lift station in an amount to not exceed $30,000.
I second it.
I have,
Luke, did you have a question before when?
I did.
Okay.
I did have a question. I was gonna ask why we can't put a bypass in now, and Pat answered that in his answer.
Go ahead,
That's right.
Tricia.
I have two different sets of questions. Here's my first group. The life expectancy of the meter, how old is the current meter, and what kind of a warranty do we have?
The current meter is 15 years old, and we've had the master meter at the Ross station do kind of the same thing. They're in a vault, but they aren't like in a heated space. So like the ones at the water plant will last probably many years longer than these. They just, because the piping's underground, they can't if they bring the piping out, they got to bring it into a heated space. That's why, you know, they're in there. So the warranty is a year on these only, as far as parts and, you know, labor if something were to go wrong. Parts are still readily available. The problem in this case is the only non-usable part is the part that failed in this particular meter. We had a tech come out and replace all the electronics, which they had. It just didn't fix the meter. And the only way to replace the non-usable parts is to pull the whole meter out and replace the meter, essentially.
So you said it was about 15 years old. Is that, and are you saying that that is about the life expectancy that this is
Sure.
about time?
Yes, yeah, in the ground.
Okay, so if that's the case, why was not this in the budget?
Something I just really didn't even anticipate. You know, again, we've had trouble this year and last year with the Ross station, but the electronics were replaced. This is the first one of these that we've had. We have in the repair budget for things like this. We don't name them individually, but I think, started out with over $120,000 in the line item that this is coming out of.
So that was actually my second and final question.
Sure.
But so in the budget, you said the repairs and maintenance account. So you just had kind of a bundle amount in there for unexpected expenses. How are we budget wise now that we're in the last quarter, I think, or
We
close to
spent
it?
about a quarter of it only this year.
Okay,
So I think we were at $39,000 if I recall, out of 120. So we had,
out of the repairs and maintenance budget?
right, yes,
So
we
do you
had,
think that we over budgeted, or do you think that we lucked out this year?
I think we lucked out.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Call the
Could I
roll,
add
please.
one other
Oh,
thing?
yeah, sure. Thank you, Pat.
Because of us contemplating the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation and expansion, we had a spare mixer that goes in the oxidation discs that we recently put in. The old unit failed. The cost to repair that was more than a new one. But if I spent $20,000, it was a $22,000 mixer. And in the redesign, the mixer needs to be changed size wise. They're going to put a different, larger mixer in. So me buying, and I didn't take that to the board because we have a newly rebuilt mixer in there. The chances of it going bad, being that it's brand new, were, slim to none. And why buy something for $22,000 to leave it sit on the shelf just in case? Especially when that mixer went out, we were still contemplating doing the full kind of a rebuild at the time. And I checked with the engineer, what are we putting in? I don't want to buy something that's going to sit there just in case. And so we've had a lot of instances like that where, like, a spare part that is due to be replaced. I didn't take it to the board because why buy something just to have it sit there and then we don't need it anymore. So that's why we haven't spent as much money as typical.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Laura, call the
just-
roll, please, on this. You're on mute, Laura.
Sorry, got to get used to that. Trustee
worries.
Pearson,
You're on mute, Charles.
Well, there,
There you
yes,
go.
okay. All right, trustee Meddy,
Yes.
trustee Hall,
Yes.
trustee Dolkowski,
Yes,
trustee Hirschbein.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Our last item this evening for separate action is the consideration and approval of maintenance expense for 2 irrigation pumps. Pat, you want to go over this one too, please?
Sure. These 2 pumps were contemplated and budgeted for in the capital portion for this year. We do them during the winter because they're not being used during the winter and it'll take a little bit of time. Essentially, again, they're 2 of the 4 pumps. We'll do 2 next year. But the pumps are 28 feet long. And so they get pulled out through a hatch that's in the roof of the waste plant. It's a larger crane than we have. So a crane service comes out, pulls 2 at a time. And we have 2 big ones, 2 small ones. The 2 big ones are going to be the first ones rebuilt and refurbished. So it was something that was always contemplated, and in the Goldilocks scheme of the plant design, we decided to keep some equipment. These pumps are supposed to last about 50 years. It's just time to pull them out, check them, and replace any of the worn bushings, bearings, and if necessary, an impeller. But they were never contemplated to be replaced in any project. And as long as we want to keep irrigating, they need to be maintained. Any questions?
In this company Benchmark, that's who they've done a bunch of our pumps and rebuilds, and they're
That
very
is
quick.
correct. And we have a agreement with them, which isn't typical, but essentially if we need parts, he just lets us get the parts through our vendor instead of him buying the parts from the same vendor and marking them up. So essentially we're getting parts at his cost. You know, he would pay the same as we do. So if an impeller was needed, he would give me the part number, we would order it.
Okay,
I move to approve maintenance expenses for 2 irrigation pumps in an amount not to exceed $35,000.
I second the motion.
okay. Any other questions or comments on this one? Call the roll, please, Laura.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Trustee Meddy,
Yes.
trustee Pearson,
Yes,
trustee Dolkowski,
Yes,
trustee Hall,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate all your insight. Moving on to staff reports, I have a contact that's kind of high up in one of the grocery store chains locally, and I've been talking to him again. I talked to him last summer and I couldn't get him to come out, but I think I'm getting real close to getting him. He's actually in the real estate development division of this company. And it's funny that we had the speaker this evening, because one of the things he mentioned was the close proximity to other locations, and that's what I've been hearing from him. But I said, you just got to get yourself and another one of your, senior representatives to come out and take a tour of our town. So I think I'm getting real close to having that. I'm bribing them with lunch, with dinner, with, balloons and a ride on the zebras from Gobert's, if that's what it takes. So I'm hoping that happens this month sometime, so that we can take a tour of the town and look at what's available and look at how I think they can benefit by locating a store here. So
the hot
other than
air,
that,
hot
sorry?
air balloon sounds like a good ride.
sure, I'll get Adam out here with his drone. Maybe he can give us like a drone view of the whole town from the village hall or something. We don't have to even leave, Jeff, you want to kick off staff reports, please?
Sure thing. Tonight's agenda has one item listed specifically, and that's a discussion item. And that's as we're in the background working on preparing a preliminary draft budget, which we must approve in April for the next fiscal year 2023, which will start May 1. We've inquired with the board about different initiatives that we should consider in terms of incorporating into this budget, or at least incorporate that thought process. I'm sure we all have a lot of different ideas about what could or should happen, and we wanted to integrate that. So tonight in your packet, we've identified several items that have come through as part of that process and kind of sorted it by scale of cost, either being a low to moderate cost or a moderate to high cost. So I thought it would be a good opportunity just to touch base with the board at a meeting and provide that opportunity for a discussion that might help us to prioritize, or maybe add clarity to some of these initiatives that may or may not warrant continued consideration. 3 items that we've already included in the draft budget that we think the board will prioritize, and we'd like to check in with you also and just verify. One is establishing our road resurfacing program. building reserves to replace capital equipment, and then, of course, funding our annual police pension expenses, which is a new item for us this year. So there, there's really no need to reach total final consensus on any of these items, but I did want to provide the opportunity to talk about some of the things that are in your report there and see if anybody wanted to add or subtract or ask questions about any of it before we move forward. With that, I'll open it back up to the board for any discussion.
Yeah, the market study that was mentioned early on from the gentleman from CBRE, I think that's worth investigating at least. And also a few years ago, I think it was the police department mentioned a need for a garage for some of their vehicles. And, I can see a need for it. I know that there's many options that are potentially available or what their need is. And I haven't heard any comments lately about the need, but a few years ago it was considered, important.
Thank you, Trustee Pearson. Anyone else? How about on these three items that we are including in the budget? Is there anybody who thinks that we should maybe redirect focus away from that? Right now, we do have it included. So our assumption is that we will proceed with the road resurfacing program, saving for capital equipment replacement, and funding the annual police pension. Unless I hear objections, we'll just proceed.
Those I think are a given, in my opinion. I think we need to be a little, conservative, depending on what'll happen with the proposal for development. I think, some of these things, we might need to wait to see what's going to happen with that before we can move forward with a greater than conservative budget.
Understood, certainly. Anything further? If not, I can proceed. Well, hearing none, I'll touch on Trustee Dukowski's point about the development. As you know, in December, there was the idea of asking D.R. Horton to extend their contracts into the early part of this year, which they appear to have done. So we have extended those discussions. There's been some ongoing back and forth on the draft agreement, and that remains the status at the present time. So that's about all I have in terms of an update on the project. Certainly, there's an expectation at some point to get to a public hearing before the village board. So that will, of course, have to be properly noticed when the time comes. Speaking of public hearings, just to let you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission does have two public hearings scheduled for 6 p.m. on February 22nd before the regular board meeting for two projects that they reviewed back in January over on the Bell Road Industrial Park area. So that's just a brief update, and that's all I have tonight, President Wiedemeyer.
Thank you, Jeff. Chief Parsons, how are you tonight?
I'm doing very well, sir. How are you guys?
I'm well, thank you. Any report for us this evening?
Yeah, just three quick items. As mentioned by Director Doherty last week, we had a leak in our fire suppression system in our front lobby that impacted our front lobby. Just want to give him a kind of a public shout out for all the help that he's given us to mitigate all the repairs and working with the insurance company, as well as Lieutenant Harris also. So that's underway. Hopefully we have that under wraps pretty quickly. Secondly, today we dropped off one of the two new squad cars that we got for this fiscal year to be upfitted. So our new branding, our new decals will be placed on that. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have probably a Facebook post advertising that, as well as you'll probably see them around the village. So pretty exciting times for that. I'm looking forward to getting those back. And lastly, with the release of our 2 new full-time officers to Solo Patrol, we're very hopeful to kind of do some adjustment to our manpower, minimum manpower allotted. And midnights, if you guys weren't aware, most times we run with 1 officer. So we're moving toward the goal of always having 2 officers working the streets during the midnight shift. So looking forward to that.
Chief, you froze up on us, so we'll come back to you. Albert, can you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure I got a response from everybody regarding the meetings this week. I hope that the material that was passed out was suitable. It wasn't too small for anybody. And I'm looking forward to, going over the budget and meeting with everyone, with every trustee and the president. Looking forward to it. So again, that's all happening this week outside of trustee Kubiak, which will be next week. So that's all I
Okay.
have.
Thank you, Albert. Pat, any further report tonight?
No, except thank you for approving the 2 repairs that we needed. Thank you.
Seth, how about yourself? Any further report tonight or?
I would just let you guys know that topographic survey has been picked up for the Wester Boulevard roadway improvement project, and we're more than 50% complete with the design, which is tracking well for getting that into IDOT for approval and getting that project out for bidding early on and for an earlier in the season construction. So that's good news. And then we've also picked up the topographic survey at the Ranking and Damish roundabout area.
Great. Any more scuttlebutt on the roundabout on Route 20 or with Elgin and?
That's been pretty silent. That's been silent. I've not heard anything since our last meeting more than a year ago for the phase 1 approval process.
Okay. Thank you, Seth.
Mhm.
Chief, I see you're back with us now.
Apologies, I lost internet connection out of nowhere.
What do you, anything to add for your final report there or? You
No,
all set?
I think I muddled my way through that. I'm pretty good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. Attorney Sworn, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Mr. President. Just fine. Just over the last couple of weeks, I've been working with the village manager in preparation for the zoning hearings that he alluded to during his report. I've also been working with our finance director on possibly an ordinance that might become before the board in the next few weeks in follow-up to our implementation of the police pension system. I've also been working with the village clerk on a couple of items regarding some of the ill effects of the economy, including a couple of bankruptcies and a sheriff's auction in connection with late payments of utility fees that were due to the village. Lastly, I've also been working with the village manager on the D.R. Horton annexation agreement in an effort to keep that going. And that's it, unless any of the board members have any questions for me.
Thank you, Michael. Laura, any report for us tonight?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
How are you, getting settled in well? I mean, everything seems to be running smoothly.
So far, so good. It's been a couple days over a month, and it's been good. Everyone's great to work with so far, and just getting my feet wet and everything. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with everyone.
Glad to hear. Okay. Jeff, how are we handling the public comments now? We just gonna, is there any public comments? I guess we should ask that first. Is there anybody signed in for that or?
Yeah, so we don't have any signed in public comments. We haven't received any emails through asking to be spoken to, but we do have 10 people that have signed on and are actually attending as attendees to this webinar. And so
Okay.
at this point, I would ask if any of the people who are watching and participating in this Zoom call have any public comments. If you do, and if you're using a computer, you can look at the lower center part of your screen and click the raise hand button. It may say raise hand or it may say reactions. And within, if you click reactions, it will then say raise hand. If you're on a mobile device, you can click the 3 dots that say more, and then you'll see an option for raise hand. Or if you're dialing in on a handset, you can press *9 to raise your hand, although I don't think there's anybody who is joined by telephone. And so it looks like we might have somebody from the fire district that is looking to come in and offer comment. And so I'm going to just add them here as a panelist and see if they can join the screen with us. Here we go.
You able to hear me? This is Chief Stout from the fire department.
Hi there, Chief.
I just want to just formally thank the public works director and the police chief and his crews who helped us out with the fire we had the other night on Bell Road. They did an outstanding job. Public works was phenomenal in helping me make sure we got the water supply we needed, coming out and helping salt the road, getting everything done. And the police obviously did an excellent job keeping the road clear for us and helping out on that aspect. So I just wanted to say shout out and thanks to everybody at the village for their help.
Thank you. We appreciate the comments. That was a tragic situation, but I guess a great team effort to handle it. So we'll put that on our resume for our future businesses that are interested in coming to town.
Thank you.
I did speak with the owners of JDK who had the fire, and I am familiar with those guys, obviously being in the same industry as them. And they lost 16 vehicles in that fire, total losses. The building is a total loss. Obviously, we all know it's still considered what I would consider a brand new building. So their intent is to rebuild, and but they're scurrying the entire country right now, trying to put trucks back in use because they are a pretty decent sized snow and ice removal company. And I think every truck that was lost was a truck that they utilize in those efforts. So they are on a nationwide search. And when I spoke with them last week, they had found 10 replacements as of date of last Friday. So again, I offered not much we can do as a village, but I just said that, if there's anything we can do to help with the building issues going on, just let us know, and we would offer any assistance that we could as far as permitting and all that. So they had a short video of the fire from the adjacent building, and they said that fire was what appears to be started in a vehicle. It went from a small spark to a total engulfed of the whole building within seconds. And I think the fire department was there, 6 minutes later, Chief, if you remember? I don't know if you...
4.5 minutes, and yeah, it already breached the outside windows, yes.
Yeah. They said there was nothing they could do when they arrived as far as trying to salvage vehicles or get anything out of the way. They lost equipment that was even on the outside of the building, that the fire went through the building and caught trailers and equipment on the outside of the building was also lost. So, but that's what we have insurance for, and I'm sure they'll rebuild. And it's not a convenient time, but when would it be for something like that? So, okay, Jeff, is there anybody else that's on board?
Is there anybody else that's watching right now that would like to offer some public comment? Again, use the raise hand button or *9 on your handset. Just give it a second here. I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Okay.
Going once, going twice, 3 times. I don't have anybody raising hands, so I think we have captured the comments tonight.
Okay, If there's any other business from the trustees at hand, we can discuss that. Otherwise, we'll take a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second,
Second,
Laura, can you call the roll on that, please?
Yes. Trustee Pearson,
Yes.
trustee Meddy,
Yes.
trustee Hirschbein,
yes.
trustee Hall,
Yes.
motion carries.
Trustee Delkowski, so I'm sure she voted yes too.
I'll
Thank you,
say
Trish.
yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you did.
That's
No
okay.
worries.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
everybody.
evening.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Nice to
Good
see everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.